Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing Matka, Mielen, Ytimeen by the band Saimaa.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Now, if the title Matka, Mielen, Ytimeen sounds like gibberish to you, that's because it isn't. It's actually in Finnish and it means a journey to the heart of the mind. But before I get to talking about this album anymore, I want to stop everything and tell you all, I'm a bit late, but I want to tell you all that I'm really thankful for your support. We've just reached 250 subscribers, which is 250 more than I expected to get when I started this channel, so thank you so much to everyone. And we're a quarter of a way towards 8,000 subscribers, and when we hopefully do get there one day, I can finally start a community tab and I can contact and be in communication with all of you except for the comments as usual. But anyway, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. So throughout the making of this series, I've learned several ways in which I can learn a lot about an album even before I press the play button, and a lot of what I learn actually comes from one particular site called the Prog Archives, and that site has everything about every album that I can think of. It has a lot of information about each and every band, and every album has like its own page with people commenting on it, so there's a lot of information and opinions over there, so it definitely helps along the process of making these videos. But what do you do when an album just doesn't have a page on the Prog Archives? The band isn't on the Prog Archives. What do you do then? Well, seeing as the Prog Archives really has all things progressive on it, like with almost no exceptions, I thought to myself that maybe this is a case of an album that isn't supposed to be on the list. We've had albums like this in the past, especially with An Apple a Day quite recently, which is actually psychedelic rock that doesn't have anything to do with prog, or even further back than that, we've had Singularity by May, which was a non-progressive album by every aspect, and that album was a very wrongful choice. And I actually had another album by May on the list, and I promptly removed it and replaced it with something else just so I wouldn't have to listen to that band. And when it came to today's album, I actually saw that this one didn't have a Prog Archives page, and I thought to myself, you know what, maybe I should just get rid of it. It's not going to be progressive, I'm not going to have fun doing it, it's going to get an unfair rating, so I wanted to get rid of it. But when I checked it out on Spotify, I saw that this album was actually pretty popular, and when I say popular, I actually mean it. It had like like each and every song had at least 100,000 listens, if not even going up to the ranges of 500,000. Now, considering the fact that we've already had albums on this list with a single digit number of monthly listeners, it tells you a lot about the type of music and the band, so I decided to go through with this one and actually give it a listen, and oh boy, am I pleased I did so. So firstly, let me put this out of the way. This album is prog, it is genuine prog, there's so many things progressive about it, it's not like on the verge of not being progressive. This album is prog and it should be on the prog archives. I have no idea why it isn't there. I thought that they've managed to find each and every progressive act ever, but apparently they missed some big names, and Saimaa are definitely one of those acts. But due to it not having a prog archives page, I tried looking for information about this band and this album in several different ways, only to find out that this album is really criminally underrepresented in the internet. There is no Wikipedia page, no for the band, none for the album itself. There's like a Discog page, but it's very messy, and I tried to gather as much information as I could, but I unfortunately couldn't gather that much. But what I do know is that Saimaa were formed back in 2004, but they actually released their first album only 10 years later in 2014, with today's album being their second studio album released in 2015. And this band consists of, and I'm not joking, I've counted at least 30 members. There are so many people making this one up. It's basically a super group by its sizes. You know what? It actually kind of reminds me of another band which I really like called Snarky Puppy, but their way of doing things is more like adding players that aren't related to the bands to play alongside the band, like the main core. So I don't know if this is the same case. Again, I don't really have a lot of information about this band, but what I can only assume from what I've seen is that these guys were usually playing live, and that's why for 10 years they didn't actually release any studio albums, because they mostly just played at festivals and concerts. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this, but these guys, they're from Finland, making it the 22nd country to appear on the list. Now, having all of these players inside of the band playing all at once or, you know, interchangeably makes for a grand sound. And when I say grand, I mean grand, like grandiose, the entire terminology. This band has every single instrument, every single subgenre found on it, every single idea that you can think of that lies in music probably appears on this album. And the only way I can seem to describe the music found on here and somewhat subcategorize it is saying that this is progressive world music. Now, world music by itself is a genre in music that usually takes influences from traditional classical music around the world, but we have yet to see a single album on the list that is actually categorized in such a way up until now. This band really stays true to the idea of incorporating different traditional music from around the world into their composition. There is, you know, Chinese traditional music, there's Russian traditional music on here, there's Jewish traditional music, there's Brazilian, and there's so many other things which I just couldn't discern from one another, but you can definitely feel them all. And top that all with progressive nature of the music, and you get something that is honestly otherworldly. And this album, it doesn't stop there. It takes the idea of incorporating different cultures into the music so finely that it actually has songs in different languages. I could only discern 2 languages. I could find that there were some in Finnish and then there were some songs in French, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that there are other songs sung in different languages. So if you ever wanted to listen to an album that can somehow incorporate Jewish klezmer with traditional Russian, all topped with electronic music, well, you have it over here. But as all over the place as this music sounds to be, I can guarantee to you that this album knows how to stay concise and find its own various ideas, put them in one single form, add them into a song and create something bigger from it. I have no idea how I can describe this album to you in any better way, but if there's one thing that I do have to point right now, I am allowing everyone watching this video to go ahead, close the video, close the tab, go ahead, search up this album and give it a listen. I urge you to do so, you wouldn't regret it. Now, I believe that I am smaller than what this album has to offer in the way that I really can describe to you what's found on here, and I really can dissect the music for what it is, because it's just too much, but if I know one thing is that my ears took it all in and enjoyed it to an extent unbelievable, and I had such a great time listening to this album. And despite me talking about it and saying how perfect it is, there is a slight downside to this album, and unfortunately it comes in the form of the 2 last tracks, which aren't as good as the others. Something about this album just kind of feels like towards the end it goes into this sort of autopilot, so it takes all of these wacky ideas that it introduced so far, but it just, kind of flows with it. It doesn't really try out a lot of new things, and that's like in this album's terms, not trying a lot of new things. And this album gets sort of stale towards the end, and you know what, that's the only reason for it not being a perfect album. Another minor reason that I wouldn't say takes this album down, but there are certain songs on here which are pretty rocky in nature, like they feel like 60s rock actually, very fun, very energetic, very upbeat in some way, and they're really, really cool, but at the same time they do still kind of remain progressive and worldly in some way. But these tracks, despite being overall pretty perfect, are my least perfect ones. But if you had to ask me what my favorite track from this album is, I'd tell you that it's Matka from Marskiluden. Now, I don't know if that's the way you're supposed to say it. It's actually in Finnish. It's my own translation, which doesn't help anything because it just says that it's Matka from this place with the really odd name. But this song, I've listened to it so many times since listening to this album for the first time like 3 days ago. It is so absurdly good. If you aren't in the mood or you don't have the time to listen to this entire album, at least please go ahead and listen to this singular track. It's the second one on the album. I assure you, you wouldn't regret it. Now, I might be acting all sorts of stupid on here. Maybe everyone watching this video knows this album. After all, it is pretty freaking popular over on Spotify, so maybe it just isn't on the Prog archives. It doesn't have a lot of things written about it on the internet, but somehow everyone just knows about it. So if you're one of the people that actually know this album beforehand, please tell me down in the comments. And definitely if you're one of the people that didn't know this album quite yet and you've just discovered it, I really want to know what you think of it. And finally, before we move on to the cover, if anyone from the Prog Archive staff is by chance watching this video, you should really go ahead and check these guys out and probably add them to your ranks on the Prog Archives because their place lies there. So when it comes to the cover, I think I've said too much about the album itself. I really don't have a lot to say about this cover. It doesn't excite me as much as the music does, but it is world music, so here's the world. This album, it isn't end-to-end perfect as I said, but it's definitely very close to it. So it's getting the very prestigious rating of 9 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Freehand by Gentle Giant. Yes, I know, one of the more popular albums that I haven't never listened to quite yet. Haven't never is actually not the right term because it means that I have listened to it, but I'm not going to bore you all with all of my very unreasonable thoughts. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Stay tuned for tomorrow. We're going to listen to Freehand. I of course want to thank my lovely supporter over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wallnum. You are the best. And if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.